Forget everything you think you know about cannabis. It's not merely a plant, it's a profound examination, and frankly, most people are utterly failing it. You've been bombarded with simplistic labels. Weed is either a miracle medicine or a destructive menace, a mystical portal to enlightenment or just a lazy escape from reality, a sacred herb or a sinful indulgence. But here's the stark truth that cuts through the noise. None of these convenient little boxes even begin to capture the essence of what this plant truly represents. Cannabis doesn't bend to your preconceived notions or your casual desires. Instead, it acts as a powerful amplifier, intensifying whatever already resides deep within your soul. And that, my friend, is precisely what makes it so incredibly potent and for many so dangerously misunderstood. In the hallowed traditions of ancient civilizations, cannabis was never a trivial way to kill time. It was a sacred gateway, a formidable tool for transformation, wielded only by those courageous enough to confront the entirety of their being. No filters, no distractions, no escape routes. Shamans, mystics, and dedicated seekers of truth didn't use it to decorate their egos. They used it as a sacred instrument to dissolve the ego itself, to peel back the layers of illusion and meet their raw, unvarnished selves. Now, fast forward to today, and the landscape couldn't be more different. This once revered plant is ubiquitous, sold with the casualness of candy, smoked like the latest fleeting trend, and even worshipped as a defining lifestyle. What was once a profound, deeply intentional ritual has degenerated into a mindless routine. The sacred has been grotesquely transformed into a mere spectacle. This isn't a debate about whether cannabis is inherently good or bad. This is about something far more critical, what this powerful plant is truly doing to the very fabric of your soul, and whether you're prepared for the encounter. Long before cannabis was ever casually rolled into a joint or commercially packaged for profit, it was revered as a sacred key, handled with utmost care, profound reverence, and entrusted only to those who possessed the wisdom to understand which profound doors they were on the verge of opening. At the very dawn of civilization, this plant was never perceived as a simple recreational pastime. It was a hallowed tool, a potent substance intrinsically aligned with the subtle rhythms of the spirit, its use strictly confined to the sacred context of deep ritual, disciplined fasting, heartfelt prayer, and transformative solitude. Imagine ancient India, where cannabis was a sacred offering to Shiva, the formidable god of destruction and transformation, the divine entity who dissolves all illusions so that unadulterated truth can finally be born. His devoted followers, the sadhus, didn't smoke for mere amusement. They engaged in this ritual to symbolically die to their ego, to transcend the mundane self. The chillum in their hands wasn't a fashionable accessory. It was a sacrament, a direct conduit to the divine. This reverence echoed across cultures. In the sophisticated practices of Taoist alchemy, cannabis was meticulously blended with other potent herbs, not to dull the senses, but to refine life energy, cultivate profound internal silence, and trigger visionary dreams that offered glimpses beyond the veil. It wasn't employed to numb the everyday perceptions, but to awaken a far more subtle, heightened awareness. Ancient texts eloquently describe it as a spirit ally, a powerful entity capable of either sharpening insight to a razor's edge or dangerously unbalancing one's vital life force, the chi, depending entirely on the user's inner alignment and preparedness. To the unprepared, the uninitiated, it was never considered a gift. It was a formidable test. Sufi mystics too incorporated hashish into their sacred ceremonies, seeking to dissolve the individual self into the overwhelming presence of the divine. Yet, even among these seasoned spiritual explorers, the plant remained a controversial subject. The great poet, Rumi himself, issued warnings about intoxication that merely mimics true awakening, leaving the soul tragically untouched and unenlightened. The plant was only truly revered when its use led to the annihilation of the ego, not its subtle, deceptive amplification. It had to be wielded with the respect and precision of a master swordsman, lest it cut the very hand that presumed to hold it. Among the Rastafari, cannabis or ganja is celebrated as the herb of wisdom, the very healing of the nations. But its use is far from casual. It is deeply interwoven with prayer, brought into reasoning sessions, where words and smoke ascend together in a collective, earnest search for truth. It functions as a tool for profound communion, not a cowardly escape, and is never divorced from its liturgical, spiritual context. In those sacred circles, cannabis isn't consumed to forget the world's troubles, but to remember the divine spark that resides within it and within each participant. And yet, here we stand in the contemporary West, having largely turned this profound sacrament into a trivial souvenir, a fleeting sensation. What once demanded rigorous preparation, fasting, and focused intention now demands absolutely nothing. You can acquire weed at a drive-thru, light up casually between sending text messages, and mindlessly scroll through an endless feed of meaningless digital content while adrift in a synthetically induced calm. The plant itself remains unchanged, its ancient power intact, but the context surrounding its use has been utterly desecrated. And when cannabis is stripped of its ritualistic container, it inevitably loses its compass, its spiritual direction. When the sacred ceremony disappears, all that remains is raw sensation, and sensation without purpose, without guidance, invariably devolves into mere indulgence, a hollow pursuit of fleeting pleasure. The inherent danger here doesn't lie within the plant itself. It resides in our modern audacity to engage with something once considered profoundly sacred as if it were just another form of cheap entertainment. Cannabis doesn't offer a predictable, consistent experience. It offers potent amplification. If you approach it grounded and centered, it can deepen your connection to yourself and the universe. However, if you are lost, disoriented, and adrift, it will only magnify the bewildering maze of your own confusion. Most people, tragically, don't even realize they are stumbling into a sacred temple with muddy, disrespectful feet. And then they wonder why their experience is filled only with distorted shadows and unsettling echoes. There are indeed layers of understanding about cannabis uncovered within the Hermetic, Gnostic, and mystical traditions. Profound insights that are perhaps too nuanced for a brief overview but are vital for true comprehension. The unvarnished truth is that the plant doesn't arbitrarily decide where it will take you. It simply, and often brutally, holds up a mirror. That mirror reflects absolutely everything: your deepest fears, your unresolved emotional pain, your unspoken questions, and your hidden anxieties. It doesn't care about your vibe or your casual intentions. It cares about the truth of your inner state, the core of your being. This is precisely why, in most authentic traditions, the preparation itself was the real, crucial ritual. Disciplined fasting, sacred chanting, periods of profound silence, and meticulous cleansing, all undertaken with solemn dedication before the first inhale. This wasn't born out of mere superstition. It stemmed from a profound understanding that the mind must be rendered stable, clear, and receptive before it is expanded. Used with genuine reverence and proper preparation, cannabis is not a mere drug. It's a doorway. But doors, by their very nature, lead in both directions. They can open to illuminating light, but they can just as easily swing open to reveal disorienting shadow. And the most dangerous illusion of all is to blithely believe you can handle both light and shadow when you have adequately prepared for neither. It's no accident that countless individuals report unsettling experiences of anxiety, paranoia, or a peculiar sense of being watched when they use cannabis. Most will quickly dismiss these feelings as a bad strain, an incorrect dosage, or a simple chemical imbalance. But what if these unsettling moments aren't an error of the plant at all? What if cannabis is, in fact, performing its ancient intended function? To mercilessly strip away the incessant mental noise, to pierce through the comfortable veils of illusion, and to force you to confront precisely what's been lurking beneath the surface of your awareness. Think of the wisdom shared by teachers like Shi Heng, who speaks of understanding and taming the monkey mind, those untamed, buried aspects of your psyche, the parts you've consciously rejected, conveniently forgotten, or simply never dared to truly look at. These aren't necessarily evil specters, but they are undeniably uncomfortable. Not malicious forces, but profoundly inconvenient truths. It's the unprocessed grief you've tried to bury, the righteous anger you've swallowed down, the difficult realities you couldn't bear to handle. The plant itself doesn't generate these shadows, it powerfully reveals them. Like a high-fidelity amplifier, it doesn't compose the music. It just makes whatever is already playing inside you deafeningly louder. And for a vast number of people, what's playing is a symphony of unresolved pain and internal conflict. This is the crucial aspect of the cannabis experience that few are willing to openly discuss because it doesn't align with the marketable narratives of relaxation, chill vibes, or easy enlightenment. Yet, if you consult any serious, dedicated spiritual practitioner, they will affirm that the arduous path to true awakening invariably begins in the underworld of the self, not amidst beatific visions of light, but in the stark, often painful discomfort of self-confrontation. And cannabis, when approached consciously and with respect, can serve as one of the most effective and uncompromising tools for this descent. But this is only true if you are genuinely ready, only if you are truly willing to gaze upon your own unmasked face with all its imperfections and hidden wounds. In the realm of mystical psychology, this moment of raw exposure is considered sacred. It's not a sign of failure, it's a profound invitation. That creeping anxiety that unfurls after a puff, that disorienting, spiraling sense of self-consciousness, that rising tide of paranoia, these are not malfunctions of the plant or your mind. This is direct feedback. The system, your entire being, is responding to a significant energetic shift. What's truly happening isn't that you're losing control, it's that your carefully constructed mental filters are breaking down. Your inner guard dogs, the protectors of your ego, are panicking because the fortress of your conditioned self is being breached. However, our modern culture is woefully ill-equipped to guide you through such a profound and often destabilizing experience. There is no shaman present to hold space, no elder to offer wisdom, no supportive circle to contain the unfolding process. You are often utterly alone, perhaps in your room, staring blankly at the ceiling, your heart racing, consumed by the terrifying sensation that you are dissolving. And the truth is, you are dissolving. That is precisely what the plant, in its ancient wisdom, does. It dissolves the artificial constructs. It burns away the meticulously crafted performances of the ego. If you are not adequately prepared for this stripping away process, it can indeed feel like a waking nightmare, not because the plant is inherently malevolent, but because the encounter with your unvarnished self is so terrifyingly undeniably real. Esoteric traditions have long understood this. In psychic self-defense literature, luminaries like Dion Fortune wrote compellingly about how altered states of consciousness can render the etheric body porous and highly susceptible, not just to profound insights, but also to external energetic interference. If your internal world is already a landscape of chaos and unresolved turmoil, cannabis doesn't magically fix it. It cranks up the volume, inviting every hidden fear and suppressed emotion to the surface. For genuine healing to occur, this surfacing must happen. But if you consistently run from that emergence, if you try to numb it with more consumption or distract yourself from it, the painful cycle merely repeats, high after high, until eventually nothing feels sacred anymore. Only noisy, chaotic, and ultimately empty. This is precisely why cannabis, despite its natural origins, is not automatically or universally safe. It doesn't possess the ability to distinguish between the prepared soul and the unready mind. It doesn't selectively decide who should be granted vision and who should remain comfortably asleep. It simply and quite impersonally opens the curtain. What you choose to do with what is revealed behind that curtain is entirely and often frighteningly up to you. And herein lies one of the most pervasive and dangerous misunderstandings of all. The deeply ingrained belief that the plant is supposed to make you feel better, to offer an easy escape into comfort. That is the insidious lie. The profound truth is that it's supposed to make you see. The pain, the joy, the confusion, the bliss, all of it is vital information. It is your spirit, your deepest self, urgently communicating, "Here, look at this. This needs your attention. But because we have been conditioned by society to fear and avoid discomfort at all costs, we often label these challenging moments bad trips and hastily walk away, having learned nothing, gained no insight, just another superficial story about how weed made us anxious. The reality, however, is that cannabis doesn't make you anxious. It ruthlessly shows you the anxiety you were already carrying, perhaps unknowingly, deep within. It didn't invent your discomfort, it merely unveiled it, bringing it from the shadows into the stark light of your awareness. And this uncompromising honesty makes it one of the most truthful substances you will ever encounter. But honesty, as we know, isn't always kind, and truth doesn't always feel good or comfortable. The plant is an unyielding mirror, and sometimes the reflection it shows you isn't pretty, isn't what you wanted to see. But perhaps, just perhaps, it's exactly what you desperately needed to see for your own growth and ultimate liberation. One of the greatest and most seductive spiritual traps is the tendency to mistake fleeting sensation for enduring truth. And cannabis, perhaps more than almost any other plant, tempts us powerfully into this very illusion. You light up, and suddenly you feel an expansive openness. Thoughts seem to acquire a profound depth they lacked moments before. Music becomes richer, imbued with layers of meaning you never noticed. Synchronicities appear like cleverly hidden messages from a benevolent universe, winking just at you. Your journal pages rapidly fill with insights and revelations that you would never or could never articulate while sober. It all feels intensely meaningful, deeply mystical, perhaps even like the pinnacle of spiritual attainment. But the crucial, often unasked question remains: does any of this fleeting profundity actually transform you at your core? The high, in and of itself, can be incredibly seductive. It masterfully mimics transcendence. It skillfully imitates genuine peace. But imitation, no matter how convincing, is not integration. Merely feeling expanded is not the same as truly becoming whole. Cannabis possesses the uncanny ability to create the appearance of spiritual clarity without providing the necessary foundational work to hold and sustain that clarity. And that is precisely what makes it so potentially dangerous, not because it inherently harms the physical body, but because it can subtly trick the soul into believing it has arrived at a destination when it has barely begun the journey. You might start to believe you've genuinely evolved simply because you experienced something that felt intensely profound. But true spiritual depth isn't measured by the intensity of an experience. It's measured by what you manage to carry back from that experience into your daily life. And more importantly, how you live and interact with the world when the intoxicating effects inevitably fade. Many regular cannabis users report experiencing sudden breakthroughs, powerful realizations about their past trauma, a profound sense of oneness with all life, or an acute feeling of being completely present in the moment. And these experiences are often undeniably real and valid. The danger, however, arises when these potent realizations remain suspended in the ether, unanchored to lived reality, unapplied in practical ways. They then risk turning into what seasoned esoteric teachers refer to as spiritual inflation, a dangerous swelling of the ego around the feeling of transformation, devoid of the consistent, disciplined work that actually sustains genuine growth. This phenomenon is what the Hermetic and occult traditions ominously called the false light, experiences that glitter with the appearance of enlightenment, but are in reality only sophisticated mental simulations. In Kabbalistic mysticism, this is akin to the sphere of Hod, representing the dazzling brilliance of the intellect when it becomes divorced from grounded, embodied truth. It glows with the allure of pure gold, but ultimately crumbles into worthless ash. You may believe you've seen the true light, but in reality, you've only been captivated by your own reflection in the mirror. It is no mere coincidence that many long-term, habitual users of cannabis begin to confuse fleeting insight with a stable identity. They start to wear their experiences like badges of honor rather than integrating them into the fabric of their being. They begin to sound overtly spiritual, act awakened, and liberally quote philosophers and mystics, yet their fundamental lives remain unchanged. Their ingrained patterns don't shift, their relationships fail to deepen, their underlying suffering doesn't truly dissolve, it simply becomes more poetically articulated. The plant, in these instances, has tragically become a mere prop in an elaborate performance of spiritual progress, rather than a catalyst for genuine, lasting transformation. Osho once wisely remarked, "Substances open doors that only silence should open." He wasn't denying their inherent power. He was issuing a crucial warning about their potential instability. A door forced open prematurely or without proper preparation doesn't tend to stay open, and the visions it offers can severely distort reality if the mind isn't truly ready and stable enough to receive them. The high can insidiously become a pedestal from which you look down upon others who haven't seen what you've seen, when in stark reality, nothing has been seen with true clarity, only felt with intense but ultimately fleeting emotion. The core problem isn't the insight itself, it's what you choose to do with it. Cannabis can absolutely offer valuable perspective, a different vantage point from which to view your life and your patterns. But unless that newfound perspective translates into tangible practice, into concrete changes in how you live and interact, it's just another form of mental stimulation, a spiritual sideshow. If it doesn't fundamentally shift how you show up in conflict, how you courageously face your own shadow, how you genuinely serve others, and how you navigate the inevitable sufferings of life, then it has become a spiritual distraction cleverly disguised as awakening. And that is the real danger. Not the plant itself, not the smoke, but the alluring story you tell yourself about what it all means. The high is not the truth, it's merely a doorway. But if you choose to stand indefinitely in that doorway, mistakenly believing you've arrived at your destination, you never actually step into the room beyond. You risk becoming addicted, not necessarily to the substance itself, but to the pervasive and comforting illusion of progress. And that particular illusion, the illusion of unearned enlightenment, is often far harder to detox from than any chemical dependency. This is precisely why traditions possessing true spiritual depth never worship the high itself. They utilized it as a pointer, a signpost towards something far deeper and more substantial. They never glorified the vision alone. They always asked what that vision demanded of them. Because real, authentic awakening isn't primarily what happens on the plant, it's what unfolds after. It's found in the profound silence that follows the experience, in the conscious choices that emerge from it, and in the humbling realization that seeing something once doesn't equate to truly understanding it. Cannabis offers access, not arrival. But the world today doesn't desperately need more fleeting access to altered states. It desperately needs more anchors, more individuals who don't just visit the sacred, but courageously embody it, who don't just feel the truth, but ardently live it. Cannabis doesn't just affect your thinking mind, its influence extends deeply into the subtle body, that invisible, intricate architecture of your being, which carries your thoughts, emotions, memories, and delicate energetic imprints. You can't see this subtle anatomy with your physical eyes, but you can most certainly feel its presence and its shifts. And when the plant interacts with this energetic field, it doesn't politely ask for permission. It powerfully amplifies whatever is already vibrating there. This is why, for some individuals, cannabis can unlock profound intuition, heightened sensitivity, and an exquisitely sharp sense of presence. For others, however, it unearths and magnifies internal chaos. This chaos isn't random. It's the direct byproduct of stagnant, uncleared, or imbalanced energy that has been residing within their system. Think of your subtle body as a finely tuned musical instrument. When it's perfectly in tune, well-maintained and clear, cannabis can act like a master's bow drawn skillfully across a violin string, drawing out beautiful resonance, harmonious melodies, and even the profound music of silence. But when that same instrument is dusty, out of tune, its strings misaligned and neglected, all the plant does is amplify the discordant noise, the jarring cacophony. And in that overwhelming inner noise, people often tragically confuse mere stimulation for genuine wisdom. You might feel more intensely so, but you're not necessarily seeing more clearly. You're just louder inside. And when your inner sacred space becomes crowded and cluttered with amplified noise, true clarity becomes an impossible aspiration. Traditions that possess a deep understanding of these energetic dynamics speak frequently of energetic hygiene. This isn't some obscure mystical concept. It's fundamental spiritual self-care, akin to how showering is essential physical hygiene. Practices such as disciplined fasting, conscious breathwork, sacred chanting, invigorating cold exposure, heartfelt prayer, and periods of profound silence aren't mere spiritual accessories or optional extras. They are vital clearing rituals. They stabilize your energetic field. They ensure that when you choose to open a potent door with a plant like cannabis, you're not stepping into a room cluttered with years of unresolved emotional debris and psychic residue. In healing modalities like Reiki and other forms of energetic practice, cannabis is sometimes described as a field disruptor, not necessarily because it's inherently harmful, but because it creates a significant surge in energetic sensitivity. That surge can indeed help you access subtle energies and perceptions, but it can also leave you feeling unpleasantly porous and vulnerable. Practitioners who aren't adequately grounded often find their healing sessions become unstable, chaotic, or energetically muddled after using the plant. Sensations might increase dramatically, but their ability to control and direct the energy often decreases. The same principle holds true in advanced Kundalini work, where cannabis is known to sometimes awaken dormant, powerful energy before the body and nervous system are adequately prepared to handle such an intense influx. You might initially feel incredibly open, electrically charged, even euphoric until suddenly you don't. Until you crash, spiral into confusion, or find yourself utterly unable to ground the overwhelming experience in any meaningful or sustainable way. Amazonian shamans, who have worked intimately with plant medicines for millennia, wisely say that every plant opens, but every plant also tests. And cannabis is certainly no exception to this rule. They believe that each plant carries a distinct consciousness, a spirit, a unique frequency, and when that spirit enters your being, it begins to communicate, not through spoken language, but through raw emotion, vivid memory, and palpable energetic sensation. If you are not clean, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, that sacred communication becomes scrambled, distorted by your own internal residue. Instead of pristine clarity, you receive only confusion dressed in the deceptive clothing of profound insight. This is precisely why so many people report feeling drained, unfocused, or emotionally raw and fragile after periods of heavy cannabis use. It's not because the plant is inherently depleting, but because they entered into the experience unprepared, without any prior clearing, without proper containment, and most importantly, without true reverence. It's akin to plugging a delicate, highly sensitive musical instrument into a distorted amplifier with frayed, faulty wires. The result isn't beautiful music, it's jarring, unpleasant noise, and the longer you're exposed to that internal static, the more it inevitably wears down your natural sensitivity and clarity. Cannabis interacts with the energy body, much like fire interacts with a dry, untended forest. It spreads rapidly, it consumes, it can bring forth illuminating light, but only if the space is already clear and well maintained. Otherwise, it just burns indiscriminately, without sufficient grounding, without unwavering clarity of intention, and without consciously established energetic boundaries. What was meant to elevate and enlighten can instead begin to fragment and disorient. You may find you lose focus easily, your willpower wanes, and you start living in a persistent mental fog that initially feels peaceful. But underneath that superficial calm lies a dull, insidious kind of stagnation. And here's the truly subtle danger. You begin to mislabel that fog as calm. You start to associate the dulling of your authentic sensation with genuine healing. But healing is never numbness. Healing is the vibrant return of clarity. Healing is the restoration of personal power, not its indefinite suspension. And cannabis, when used without keen energetic awareness and proper preparation, can temporarily mask underlying imbalances instead of truly resolving them. So the crucial question you must ask yourself becomes, is your system truly clean enough to receive clarity? Have you meticulously prepared your inner temple before you invite the spirit of the plant in? Because cannabis doesn't clean the house for you, it just powerfully turns on all the lights. What you ultimately see depends entirely on what was already there, hidden in the shadows of your unprepared self. Once upon a time, in ages past, cannabis was approached with solemnity, its use reserved for moments when the soul was truly ready, prepared, and seeking profound connection. Now, in stark contrast, it's often used simply because the work week has ended or because boredom has set in. This dramatic shift didn't occur suddenly. It was a slow, subtle, insidious decline, cleverly disguised as liberation and personal freedom. What was once deeply sacred became merely symbolic. What was once intentional and purposeful became impulsive and casual. We transitioned from a culture that sought the smoker's spirit to one that consumes smoker's content. And in this unfortunate process, the plant itself didn't lose its intrinsic power. Rather, we simply lost our way of holding it, of honoring its sacred potential. In the Rastafarian tradition, for example, cannabis wasn't something you did alone in your room as a quick fix to cope with stress. It was meticulously integrated into sacred reasoning sessions, communal ritual gatherings dedicated to deep philosophical inquiry and spiritual reflection. The smoke ascended with the sacred chants, with heartfelt prayers, with the resonant heartbeat of drums. It was a communal ascent towards higher understanding, not a solitary personal escape from reality. The focus wasn't on merely feeling good. It was about earnestly finding alignment with Yah, with God, with Source, with the Universal One. And if your heart wasn't clean, if your intentions weren't pure, the herb would unflinchingly show you. It wasn't entertainment, it was a potent initiation. Similarly, within the African diaspora, particularly in Afro-Brazilian religions like Candomblé and Umbanda, while cannabis may not always have been the central plant spirit, the underlying concept governing its use was paramount. Every plant was perceived as holding akse, a unique spiritual force, a specific frequency, a defined purpose, a distinct vibration. To misuse a plant was to misuse its inherent energy, and to do so was to actively invite imbalance and disharmony into one's life. The ritual itself determined the effect. The ceremony meticulously created the sacred container. Nothing considered sacred was ever taken lightly or without being earned through preparation and respect. There was no such thing as casual consumption. There was only profound communion. But this ancient wisdom, this call for discipline and reverence, is not what the fast-paced modern world particularly wanted. Ritual, by its very nature, requires time, unwavering discipline, and genuine humility. Ritual is, frankly, inconvenient, and modern capitalism thrives on convenience, on instant gratification. So, the plant was systematically extracted from its rich cultural roots, sanitized for mass consumption, and cynically rebranded as a trendy lifestyle accessory. Now, it's wrapped in sleek, appealing packaging, enthusiastically endorsed by social media influencers, and sold with the same superficial pitch as a wellness smoothie. This will make you feel better. There's rarely any mention of confronting your shadow, no talk of the plant as a mirror reflecting your inner state, just aesthetically pleasing mood boards, soft pastel fonts, and a shallow performative nod to mindfulness. The sacred was ruthlessly commercialized, the essential ceremony was callously deleted, and cannabis, in many contexts, became just another product, not a sacred portal. Now people casually light up while binge-watching television shows that actively feed them more societal programming. They scroll endlessly through their phones while smoking, swiping through a deluge of empty, vapid content meticulously designed to hijack their dopamine reward systems. There is no supportive circle, no sacred chant, no transformative silence, just layers of stimulation piled upon more stimulation. And in that chaotic, layered internal environment, the plant inevitably becomes a disorienting fog instead of an illuminating fire, inducing numbness instead of fostering clarity. Even at festivals that explicitly claim to be spiritual, burning incense, playing ecstatic music, selling chakra stickers, the plant is often reduced to mere background noise, an afterthought. The ritual devolves into a mere performance. The ceremony becomes a superficial costume, and the true transformative essence of the plant, the potent part that could genuinely disrupt, awaken, and transform, is tragically buried under countless layers of shallow aesthetics. But cannabis, in its ancient, wild spirit, has absolutely no interest in being merely aesthetic. Its spirit is old, untamed, and unapologetically real. It doesn't care about your carefully crafted branding or your Instagram feed. It cares deeply about your true intention. And without a strong, consciously created container, its powerful energy spills out, flowing aimlessly into your existing distractions, into your anxieties, into your unchecked emotional wounds. Without clear direction and focused intent, it simply amplifies your current state of being. That's precisely why some people feel inspired, creative, and connected when they use it, while others feel stuck, confused, and anxious. Same plant, profoundly different vessel. So when we collectively stripped away the ritual, we simultaneously stripped away the very structure that made the experience potentially sacred. Without that vital framework, what's left is often just entertainment masquerading as healing, a hollow mimicry of genuine depth, a faint sad echo of what was once profoundly holy. The plant itself has not changed, but the way we choose to use it has, drastically. And until we consciously reclaim the sacred container, until we relearn the art of preparation and respect, we'll keep wondering why the experience often feels so shallow, inconsistent, or even disturbingly chaotic. It's not that cannabis has lost its power, it's that we, as a culture, have largely stopped preparing ourselves to receive it with the honor and intention it deserves. The ritual was never merely a performance for some external divine entity. It was always a profound way to prepare you, to cleanse your mind, to purify your energy, to open your heart, so that when the plant inevitably opened the door, you could walk through it with grace, clarity, and purpose, not with fear and confusion. We didn't truly lose the sacred, we simply stopped recognizing it. The most dangerous and insidious lie whispered in the spiritual marketplace is that pure intention alone is enough, that if you simply mean well, the plant will benevolently guide you. But cannabis, like all true and potent spiritual allies, doesn't operate on mere sentimentality or vague good wishes. It responds to tangible energy, to genuine readiness, to the unwavering clarity of your inner world, not to your hopeful, wishful thinking. Far too many seekers approach this powerful plant with a sense of casual curiosity but lack any reliable compass to navigate the journey. They light up hoping to feel better, to think more deeply, to escape the gnawing ache of boredom, or to soften the jagged edges of daily stress. But they conveniently forget a crucial truth: the plant doesn't give you peace. It starkly reveals whether or not peace was already residing within you. Used with keen discernment and conscious awareness, cannabis can indeed be a profound ally. It can help you detach from the incessant noise of the ego, see your ingrained patterns with newfound clarity, and gently soften the rigid grip of your internal narratives. But the ultimate key is never the plant itself. The key is, and always will be, who you are when you meet it. Without a consciously established structure, the experience can become slippery and disorienting. Without dedicated reflection, any insight gained quickly evaporates like morning mist. Without consistent grounding practices, the feeling of openness can easily devolve into a sense of fragmentation and vulnerability. So, the vital question becomes, how do you use the plant without, in turn, being used by it? Firstly, by understanding that cannabis should rarely, if ever, be your first reflexive response to discomfort. If you feel anxious, don't immediately reach for a joint. Instead, sit with the anxiety. Ask it questions. Explore its roots. If you're feeling restless and agitated, don't seek to escape it through intoxication. Instead, move your body. Breathe deeply and consciously. Journal your thoughts and feelings. Only when the body is settled and the mind has achieved a measure of clarity can the plant potentially act as a tool of genuine refinement, rather than merely another source of disruption. Before engaging with cannabis, ask yourself with radical honesty, what am I truly seeking here? Is it genuine clarity or temporary comfort? Am I pursuing uncomfortable truth or fleeting relief? Am I reaching for the plant out of a desire for authentic alignment? Or am I subtly attempting to avoid something difficult within myself? There exists a massive critical difference between using cannabis to consciously explore the vastness of consciousness and using it to mute what consciousness is desperately trying to tell you. One path is sacred and expansive. The other is just another repetitive, ultimately unfulfilling loop. The wisest spiritual traditions never relied on cannabis alone as a panacea. It was always just one potent element within a larger, more comprehensive spiritual ecosystem. Disciplined fasting, periods of profound silence, sacred chanting, heartfelt prayer, conscious breathwork, and meticulous cleansing rituals. These were not unnecessary, archaic traditions. They were, and are, essential practices of spiritual hygiene. They were the foundational practices that helped prepare the vessel, clear the mental and energetic clutter, and finally tune the nervous system so that the plant could then perform its deeper, more subtle work. Grounding practices, therefore, matter immensely. If you choose to use cannabis, consider doing so in silence. Sit on the earth, connect with nature. Stay off your phone and turn off the constant background noise of media. Allow the plant to guide you inward, towards your own center, not outward into more distraction. Afterwards, write down what comes through, reflect deeply on the experience, and most importantly, integrate what you learn. Take the insights and weave them into how you move through the world, how you speak to others, how you love, and how you serve. That is where the real transformative alchemy truly happens. Not merely in what you see during the experience, but in what you consciously do with what you see afterwards. Cannabis without dedicated integration risks becoming just another form of spiritual entertainment. You might start chasing the feeling of insight instead of doing the hard, consistent work of embodiment. It can subtly become a part of your identity. You may begin to associate your perceived depth with the plant itself, as if you cannot access wisdom or clarity without its assistance. And that is the insidious beginning of dependency, not necessarily a chemical dependency, but an existential one. You forget that the plant is merely a mirror. The depth, the wisdom, the clarity, all of it was always within you. The cannabis only helped to reveal what you had temporarily forgotten how to access. The real, profound journey truly begins when you can access that state of clarity and presence without needing anything external. You are not meant to live perpetually inside the high. You are meant to courageously bring what you found there back into the often mundane reality of your daily life. The insight itself is not the ultimate prize. The consistent application of that insight is the transformation. Can you choose to be kind and compassionate even when you're not feeling euphoric? Can you stay fully present and engaged without chemical assistance? Can you walk through conflict, boredom, and routine with an awakened heart and still remain consciously aware? This is how you utilize the plant without losing yourself in the process, by never allowing it to become your sole source of meaning or your primary coping mechanism, by consistently returning to yourself, to your own inner wisdom as the true center. The plant may indeed open the door, but only you can walk the path. And if you're not actively walking, you're merely circling, feeling more, but ultimately learning nothing substantial. You don't need more fleeting highs. You need more unwavering honesty, the kind of raw honesty that isn't always pleasant, but is always undeniably real, the kind that ruthlessly strips away all the glittering illusions and compels you to ask, is this truly helping me grow, or is it just helping me hide? Cannabis was never intended to be used in stark isolation. Across diverse cultures, ancient lineages, and countless centuries, its spiritual use was almost invariably collective, communal. This wasn't because individuals couldn't access altered states on their own, but because those wise elders who truly understood the plant's profound power knew a critical secret. Without a strong, sacred container, power becomes unpredictable and potentially dangerous. And without a supportive community, insight can easily warp into distortion. The plant might indeed open you, crack you wide open to new realities, but it's the circle, the collective, that lovingly and skillfully holds you, ensuring that you can integrate the experience rather than fragment from it. In the Rastafari tradition, as mentioned, cannabis is not smoked casually or alone. It's an integral part of reasoning sessions, sacred gatherings where the herb is passed with deep reverence, accompanied by scripture, thoughtful discussion, communal chanting, and the conscious collective pursuit of divine truth. The focus isn't on merely getting high, it's on getting aligned with a higher purpose, with Yah. Words are shared with considered weight. Silence is respected as a space for reflection. Everyone present becomes both a student and a teacher. The herb moves clockwise, like the passage of time, like the flow of energy, like the sacred wheel of life itself. In that hallowed space, cannabis is not the central focus. It is the sacred bridge, facilitating connection and shared understanding. The same principle of collective engagement holds true among certain indigenous traditions. In many Amazonian and Central African cultures, while cannabis may not always be the central plant medicine in the same way as ayahuasca or tobacco, the underlying principles governing the use of psychoactive substances are remarkably consistent. Potent substances that alter perception are only ever taken when the group, the ritual, and the intention are meticulously and sacredly aligned. The experience, crucially, belongs not just to the individual, but to the entire container, the collective. The sacred songs, the heartfelt prayers, the crackling fire, the wisdom of the elders, even the unseen spirits perceived to be watching from the edges of the ceremonial space, all contribute to the holding and shaping of the experience. You don't journey alone, even when your eyes are closed and you are deep within your own inner landscape. The circle, both seen and unseen, steadfastly holds you. It's not just about what the plant reveals to you, it's about what others help you interpret, understand, and integrate when you return from the depths of the experience. Contrast this ancient wisdom with the typical modern experience. A joint often held in one hand, a smartphone, the portal to endless distraction clutched in the other. There's rarely any grounding, no conscious preparation, no clear exit strategy or integration plan, just a relentless influx of stimulus often experienced in profound solitude. What is meant to be a sacred journey often devolves into just another episode of dissociation, a temporary escape from the discomfort of being. And that's precisely where the dangerous spiral can begin. Because when you are psychically and energetically cracked open by a powerful substance, and there's no one there to help you gently close, to help you make sense of what you've seen and felt, the insight doesn't integrate, it fragments. You might begin to think you've tapped into something incredibly profound, a secret truth of the universe, but without a witness, without an external mirror for calibration, without the grounding wisdom of a community, it can easily become a private, unverified religion built upon half-remembered thoughts and disconnected, ungrounded realizations. And you risk mistaking profound loneliness for genuine enlightenment. But when you are held within a real, intentional, sacred circle, something entirely different and transformative happens. You are heard, you are seen. You are gently reminded that your individual insight is part of a much larger, collective truth. That what you experienced matters not just for your personal evolution, but for the well-being and growth of the entire community. You become responsible, in a sense, for what the plant has gifted you. Because the plant doesn't just give, it also tasks you. It implicitly asks, what will you do with this vision? Will you live differently now? Will you serve others more deeply? Will you commit to your own healing and the healing of the collective? In sacred circles, the ego has far less room to perform its usual tricks. You can't easily pretend you're awakened when someone else in the circle, grounded in their own truth, sees right through your carefully constructed facade. You can't claim profound transformation without being gently but firmly held accountable for embodying that change in your daily life. There's simply no place to hide inside a well-held ceremony, and that's precisely why it works so effectively. Because it's not ultimately about how the plant makes you feel in the moment. It's about how the entire experience is witnessed, processed, and integrated with the support of others. The circle acts as a crucial safeguard, preventing individual illusion from hardening into unquestioned doctrine. When you're alone with a powerful experience, there's no challenge, no healthy resistance, and so everything you perceive can feel overwhelmingly true. But not everything you feel is objective truth. Not every idea that emerges during a high is inherently sacred or divinely inspired. Some are mere projections of your own mind. Some are distortions colored by your unresolved issues. Some are just mental noise cleverly wearing spiritual clothing. The circle helps you discern the authentic signal from the distracting static. It helps you test your vision in the clear, compassionate light of shared reality. Even in bustling modern cities, sacred containers can be consciously created. A few trusted friends, candles lit, phones turned off, a clear spoken intention, a shared moment of silence before and after the experience. A collective commitment to reflect, to hold space for one another, to aim not just to trip, but to genuinely transform. You don't necessarily need a remote jungle or an ancient temple to do it right. You need reverence. You need a semblance of ritual. You need community. Without these vital elements, cannabis often floats like fragrant incense in a windy open room, beautiful for a moment, but ultimately directionless and quickly dissipated. The plant, with its potent spirit, asks for structure, because its energy is inherently powerful. And like any form of power, it magnifies whatever it touches. In a supportive, collective setting, it can magnify clarity, healing, and shared vision. Alone and ungrounded, it can just as easily magnify confusion, illusion, or the tenacious grip of the ego. So perhaps the pertinent question is no longer just, what are you smoking for? But rather, who are you smoking with? Because the presence or absence of a sacred container often determines whether the plant becomes your wise teacher or your most cunning distraction. There inevitably comes a point in every sincere seeker's journey where the initial thrill of the altered state, the sheer novelty of the experience, begins to lose its potent meaning. The visions may become repetitive. The insights may start to echo things you've heard or realized before. And that, precisely, is when the deeper, more authentic path truly begins. Not with a pursuit of more intensity, but with a commitment to more profound honesty. Because the real transformative work is not found in what you see or feel when you're high, but in what you consciously choose to do and be when you're sober. Discernment, that keen ability to distinguish truth from illusion, becomes the new, more refined high. Not fleeting stimulation, but enduring clarity. Not temporary euphoria, but sustainable alignment. Cannabis, without question, can open doors. That has never been in dispute. But merely opening doors is the easy part. Walking through them with conscious intention, with a commitment to genuine integration, and with profound humility, that is the more challenging path, the one that most people, unfortunately, tend to avoid. Because it's always much easier to chase the feeling of awakening than to do the arduous, consistent work of actually awakening. It's easier to light up and escape than to sit still with your own discomfort. It's easier to feel deep than to live deep. But simply feeling something intensely doesn't automatically make it true, and merely seeing something in a vision doesn't make it objectively real. Discernment is the crucial faculty that separates genuine insight from captivating illusion. It's what keeps you from tragically mistaking the echo for the original essence. In ancient Greek philosophy, discernment was called crisis, the inner blade that skillfully cuts through deception. In Vedanta, it's known as viveka, the profound power to distinguish the real from the unreal. This isn't about cultivating a cynical skepticism. It's about fostering genuine spiritual maturity. It's the courageous ability to question even your most profound and cherished experiences, to humbly ask, is this an objective truth, or is this just what my ego desperately wanted to hear? Because cannabis, in its impartiality, will often give you both. It will speak in riddles, in evocative poetry, in raw, unfiltered emotion, and if you're not adequately grounded, if your discernment isn't sharp, you risk building entire belief systems out of metaphors that were never meant to be taken literally, constructing elaborate castles in the sky from fleeting wisps of feeling. That's precisely where the insidious process of spiritual inflation often begins. The ego, ever cunning, rebrands itself as awakened. It starts speaking in lofty mystic terms, adorning itself with the garments of transcendence, liberally quoting scriptures and spiritual masters without ever truly living their teachings. It becomes addicted, not necessarily to the plant itself, but to the intoxicating feeling of being special, of being in the know, of possessing secret knowledge. You start to confuse heightened sensitivity with genuine superiority, and you gradually stop listening to anything or anyone that doesn't enthusiastically support your current high or your inflated self-perception. This is why discernment must be diligently cultivated before cannabis is considered as a spiritual tool. Because without it, you're not truly opening to higher truth. You're often just rearranging the furniture inside your own pre-existing delusions. The plant, as always, amplifies what's already there. If you carry underlying confusion, it will bloom spectacularly. If you carry genuine clarity, it will deepen and expand. The plant doesn't discriminate, it simply reflects. And so, the critical questions become: are you willing to sharpen your inner blade of discernment? Are you willing to ask profoundly uncomfortable questions about your true intentions, your hidden expectations, and your ingrained patterns? Are you willing, crucially, to set the plant down when it no longer genuinely serves your growth? That last point might be the hardest test of all, the courage to not use the plant when you don't truly need it, the wisdom to realize that the ultimate insight was never contained within the leaf itself, but in how the leaf helped you remember the vast wisdom already residing within you. Cannabis is not the path. It's, at best, a compass. It can point, it can direct, but it cannot walk the way for you, and it certainly cannot carry you to your destination. The plant may hold up a mirror, but mirrors don't create, they only reflect. They don't move, you do. And if the reflection itself becomes the primary focus, you tragically forget what it was there to show you in the first place. This is the critical juncture that many seekers never reach. They stop at the sensation, they stop at the poetry, but the mystics, the true seekers, the ones who courageously walk the authentic path, they go further. They learn to trust the quiet wisdom that follows the dissipation of the high. They learn to listen intently for the subtle messages that don't come wrapped in dazzling euphoria. They learn to sit patiently with discomfort and ask what profound lesson it's here to teach. Because the ultimate goal is not to stay perpetually high. The goal is to stay consistently awake. Not just when the plant temporarily opens your eyes, but when you wake up every single morning and consciously choose to live aligned, grounded, and authentically real. That is the true spiritual practice. That is the path beyond all illusion. There comes a pivotal moment in every genuine seeker's journey when every external tool must eventually be laid down, every perceived shortcut must be willingly surrendered, and every exhilarating high must be scrupulously examined for what it truly was. A spark, a signal, a potent beginning, but never ever a final destination. Cannabis is not the ultimate answer, it never was. At its very best, it can be a profound and insightful teacher. At its worst, and used unconsciously, it becomes yet another alluring distraction, cleverly dressed in the guise of spiritual depth. And if you are truly, deeply listening, not just to the noise in your head, but to the quiet wisdom of your soul, you will intuitively know when it's time to stop chasing the ephemeral smoke and begin diligently building the enduring fire within yourself. The greatest, most liberating lesson cannabis can ultimately teach you is that you never actually needed it in the first place. This isn't because the plant is worthless or devoid of power, but because its true power was always meant to reflect and awaken something potent yet dormant deep inside you. Something precious waiting patiently to be remembered. The clarity you felt during those heightened moments was always yours. The profound stillness, the flashes of insight, the deep sense of connection, none of that originated from the plant. The plant merely, and sometimes forcefully, peeled back the layers of conditioning and forgetfulness that had obscured your innate ability to feel and access these states. But remembering is not the same as becoming. The journey doesn't conclude with what you saw in a vision. It truly begins with what you consciously choose to do with that insight now in your everyday life. This is precisely why the ancient traditions never glorified the plant itself. They deeply respected it. They used it as a sacred doorway, but never as a permanent crutch. The ceremony always ended, and then the crucial, often challenging work of integration began. You were expected to take what you saw, what you learned, and painstakingly turn it into tangible action, into unwavering presence, into profound humility. You were meant to walk into conflict differently, to love with fewer conditions, to serve from a deeper, more authentic place. That's the entire point. That's the whole sacred game. What good is vision if you never fundamentally change how you live? What ultimate use is insight if you never apply it in the messy, unpredictable, often boring and uncomfortable reality of your actual life? It's relatively easy to feel spiritual when surrounded by smoke and silence. It's infinitely harder to maintain that spiritual connection in the midst of traffic jams, during heartbreak, or within the endless repetition of the ordinary. But that is where real, enduring spiritual growth truly happens. Not on the metaphorical mountaintop of a temporary high, but in the challenging valleys of everyday existence. Not solely in the altered state, but in the consistent, everyday choice to remain awake when it would be far easier and more comfortable to fall back asleep. Integration isn't glamorous, it's not psychedelic, it's certainly not aesthetic in the superficial modern sense. It's disciplined follow-through, it's unwavering commitment, it's knowing when to consciously close the door to formal ceremony and bravely open the door to the fullness of life, and then to walk through that door with grace, courage, and authenticity. This is what the spirit of the plant, in its deepest wisdom, ultimately asks of you. Not blind reverence, not mindless worship, but embodied truth. You were never meant to become permanently dependent on the teacher, whether that teacher is a plant, a person, or a philosophy. You were meant to learn, to grow, and ultimately to graduate. You're not here on this earth merely to orbit meaning from a safe distance. You're here to make it real, to embody it, to take the precious fragments of truth you've glimpsed and meticulously ground them into the very way you speak, the way you listen, the way you show up even when no one is watching. That's where the plant's influence becomes a true legacy, not just a substance you occasionally use, but a spirit that genuinely shaped you for the better. Not a high you endlessly chased, but a mirror you courageously faced again and again until it finally showed you something undeniably, authentically real. And here's what's profoundly real. The sacred doesn't need cannabis. The sacred is already and always has been within you. The ultimate question then is, are you willing to live like it? Are you willing to stop desperately looking for the signal outside of yourself and start courageously transmitting it from the depths of your own being? This conversation, this exploration, doesn't end here. If you've made it this far, if these words resonate deep within you, then you are already seeking something far more substantial than mere sensation. And that deeper seeking is precisely what endeavors like Insights Academy aim to support. Perhaps you'll explore further, sign up for a newsletter, receive a digital copy of a text like the Kybalion, not as a passive gift, but as an active tool. Because some teachings, some truths, simply cannot be fully packaged in a short video or a single article. Some are meant to be diligently studied, deeply lived, and fully embodied. Because in the end, it's not truly about the plant. It's about you, not about what you smoke, but about what you